The Rich Zeoli Show podcast.
All right, welcome back. Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Jeff Sessions is right to roll back the Justice Department consent decrees. So says my friend Ben Menace, who is a writer at The Hill, a contributor at thehill.com, a number of other places as well. He's a nonpartisan public safety, security, and integrity SME. What is an SME, by the way?
The subject matter expert.
Subject matter expert. I need those initials after my name.
Yeah, it's someone who's been there for a long time. And, you know, I've had some ups and some very big downs in the last 22 years in a business nobody really, raises their hand for unless they're crazy. So, that makes you an expert after a while.
The consent decree thing, I don't think anyone's really an expert in that. So I'm grateful that you can come and enlighten us on exactly what it means and then what Jeff Sessions' action means going forward.
Absolutely. So let's do a little history first, and then we'll launch into it. Consent decrees are not a new thing. They started showing up in use in a lot of municipal police agencies as a bridge between the Justice Department Civil Rights Division and a notable change in policies and procedures at a local level. And the first notable use of this was the Los Angeles Police Department after the Rodney King beating, trial, and riots of 1991 and 2. So around the time Willie Williams went to Los Angeles, the notable changes had to be made, rightfully so after the Rodney King beatings. But the difference between how they were used then and how they're being used now was that they usually followed some type of large-scale corruption scandal or violent scandal in the way that there were convictions after the federal case in the Rodney King trial, right?
Okay.
So during the Obama administration, and, in a lot of agencies, you started seeing it being presented to chiefs and commissioners, especially ones with a highly political track like Charles Ramsey, as an alternative to avoid further scrutiny. So it was almost like a strong-arm tactic. Come enter into this consent decree because there have been several complaints on your agency coming to us, or we will do something else. We will sue you. Right?
Makes sense.
The issue that Attorney General Sessions is looking at now, and remember, he isn't rolling back, so you should see some of the comments on this article I wrote yesterday in The Hill, where people are saying, you're for police corruption, you're for police brutality, he's trying to attack black people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's looking for a review of the current way these consent decrees are issued after there were meetings with the law enforcement community in the Trump administration. And here's why. A lot of these consent decrees follow Department of Justice investigations that, quite honestly, aren't conducted in the same manner that would warrant an actual court action. Okay? So if you look at the reports from Baltimore, Chicago, Ferguson, Missouri, following their riots and protests, 90% of the report is anecdotal evidence, which means they went into neighborhoods where there were big problems with the police, and people said, yeah, the cops beat us all the time, and these cops do this, and these cops do that. And when DOJ looked at it, either the situations resulted in an arrest of the complainant, or the officer was exonerated or held not guilty in court, the way we saw in Ferguson, Missouri. So there isn't actually enough action rising from any of these investigations to warrant, let's say, an FBI probe, a corruption probe, or even a single brutality complaint in a federal court of law, right? But departments are turned up in by these consent decrees, which basically have halted police activity. And here's why. Police activity requires two things. It requires an officer who feels empowered to do their job. Obviously they were motivated enough to do it. And the second thing is the officer needs to get on and off the street in a timely enough manner that they could, there's a cost benefit to this issue, right? Mm-hmm. So if a cop in Seattle, Washington is where I've been doing a study for and a DA candidate here to see how they could streamline processes and get more cops out on the street instead of doing paperwork, right? Seattle, when I would ride with them in 1992 through 1999, They were on and off the street in under 45 minutes. The county sheriff processed the prisoner. It was beautiful. It was something that would be an envy to the country right now.
Right.
Now it's upwards of 3 hours because of these DOJ questionnaires. And these DOJ questionnaires don't just include the conditions of the arrest, the probable cause that led to the arrest, and the demographics, the pedigree of the suspect, but they go into the background of the officer. They track officers. In Washington, D.C., where I used to work, the officers are actually tracked for their promotionals. So even though you had no complaints on you that would be substantiated and hold you back from a promotion, the number of your use of forces would be tracked by this DOJ consent decree, and it would withhold you from getting promoted, even though they were all righteous.
Okay. So Ben Maness is with us. He's an expert in law enforcement and public safety issues, and his piece in The Hill is about Jeff Sessions' right to roll back Justice Department consent decrees. I think what you just said right there is really the key point, because these consent decrees have the ability to really end a police officer's career. Is that a fair way to say it?
Well, it depends on how the agency in question.
I mean, if you're not getting promoted, you know what I mean? If they can stop your promotion, which means more money or less money if you're not getting promoted, that's not a good thing for anybody.
And if they start basically creating, and this is what you need to look at, especially if you're a police officer in a city that has this, if they start rewarding less activity and less proactive policing, then the officers who are doing less are the ones getting promoted, working into command positions. So if you're an aggressive cop and you got on this job to do some good, you're basically going to get stuck, if not, God forbid, fired off an unsubstantiated complaint, which is what we saw a lot during the Ramsey administration. Now, let me be clear. I am not for corrupt cops.
No, I understand.
But let's look at this. Before the DOJ even started weighing in with these consent decrees, and this is something when I teach corruption, like I'm doing at Newman University on the 10th, right? To call the police more corrupt than an average politician is ludicrous, considering they have the internal affairs, right? They have their supervisory command structure. They have DA's offices. They have state attorney generals. They have inspectors general. The FBI. There are several people looking at police corruption. These people have accountability measures in place. If that doesn't work, that's something for the DOJ to look at. But for the DOJ to arbitrarily go in there and enter into these binding agreements with these departments that have created extreme bureaucracy and a situation where cops aren't rewarded for doing the job that they were hired to do, well, yeah, I'm completely behind our Attorney General for reviewing this and seeing if maybe it could be done in a more efficient, more fair, more legally culpable manner. And
that's really the key here, is that he's reviewing these consent decrees. He hasn't ended them, but he's reviewing them. Who does have the power to end them if they wanted them to go away? If you wanted to just say, get the feds out of local law enforcement in general, would that be an act of Congress?
No, he could do. I mean, for the consent decree angle, that's completely administrative. So that's something that Attorney General Sessions can do. But they're not going to. And I could give you great examples of how they were used effectively. LAPD being one of them. The New Orleans police, when Chief Superintendent Pennington was down there, was the most corrupt agency in the country. The guys down there working had more heart than anyone, but they had no money. So, yeah, there was a lot of corruption. And the consent decree was very positive in cleaning up that force and getting a post-Katrina force together that could address those problems. So it's not something that should be done away with. It's just something that should be done more fairly, because Baltimore and Ferguson, great examples, these are agencies that are beleaguered, working in very, very challenging areas, and they're the ones being victimized. They get brought up on trial, acquitted, brought up on trial again, charges dropped, and then now they have to work under these consent decrees. So it's almost like a gotcha when public opinion says cops are bad, but no one could prove it legally. I'm sorry. If you can't prove it legally, you shouldn't be at that table. Well, that's the way it works. Even cops have due process rights under our Constitution. Ben Maness, thanks so much for your time today. Where can we find you? You can find me on Twitter at Public Safety SME or abenjaminmaness.com. It's a long one, so at Public Safety SME is probably your best bet on Twitter. Or just search Under the Hill, last name Maness, Mannes. All right, my friend. Appreciate all your hard work on this, and we will have you on again soon. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Rich Zeoli, 3 to 6, Talk Radio 1210.